What's up, everybody? Brandon Lindsay here with the Rehabbers Playbook. I'm here with my friend Danny. Danny is a fellow TRP member, one of our newer TRP members, but one of our best because he does a lot for the group. He's always chiming in, he's always asking questions, and he's always giving advice and feedback. And he was kind enough to jump on a call with us today and share his experience in the business and how maybe it could help other people in the business grow and do things with, not repeating maybe the same mistakes that we have or that we've seen other people have. And that's one of the best parts about having a network and having a group to be a part of. So, Danny, say hi to our audience, and why don't you give everybody kind of an introduction into who you are, what you do, and where you're from?
Sure. Thank you, Brandon, for having me on this call today. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Uh, and I'll introduce myself, introducing my background. I come from a manufacturing background. I actually used to spend 14 hours a day at a factory
Wow.
and, managing workers and managing production and managing a lot of stuff, obviously, with the help of a team. So I actually have implemented some of that experience, knowledge of dealing with human beings into my real estate business.
Sure. Yeah.
And
And
real estate is all about humans, right? As we know.
absolutely. Yeah, it's all about managing. We actually just got off a TRP call today, right? And Addison was on the call talking about his new build, and he
Hmm.
was talking about how it's his first new construction project, and he's realizing that one of the things that he was worried about getting into it
Hmm.
was, do I need to know a lot about construction? And you don't. You just need to know about managing people. So would you say your background in working managing people in a factory setting that has helped you with managing subcontractors and contractors?
It has to a certain level. Now I used to manage people in Asia, versus now I'm in North America. I'm in Canada at present,
Mhm.
close to Vancouver, British Columbia. And you and me are far away, but we are still so closely tight and connected.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah, so I think that has been a plus point for me because I've studied human behavior, and that's basically that goes in every trade, right? Managing subcontractors, managing contractors, or even partners in the business, right? That who you want to JV with or do things with. So yeah.
I mean, real estate was it you who posted this? I'm gonna feel really dumb if it wasn't you who posted this, but real estate is not about the property, it's about the people.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
posted real estate is not about real estate.
Oh man, that's good thing I got that right, by the way, because that would have really killed our momentum. But yeah, that's right. Absolutely. It's all, I mean, at the end of the day, most businesses are most, of course, are people businesses. A lot more than the item you're selling or the item you're flipping or buying, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But my background has nothing got to do with real estate investments, because I came from a background where, I was taught money doesn't grow on trees and it's always hard to buy things. So I come from a middle class family,
Mhm.
uh, and I was, struggled to understand real estate till I broke my fears and I just did one first deal. Unfortunately, the deal was back in 2007, 2008 when there's a crash. So I would say I've ridden that roller coaster where
Mhm.
I was trapped in a downgoing market and I had to float, right?
Sure.
So I did pretty well, I think, floating out of there. I did come out positive by a good chunk of money. I would say $2 million is a good chunk of money.
Sure.
Uh, and that was me getting started was the most important thing for me and my family.
Absolutely. And again, another thing I really appreciate that you bring to the group is a great positive mindset. We've talked a lot recently about all the things going on. We talked on the phone on Friday, I think it was, about this.
Yes.
And all the things going on in the market, tariffs, and then you have your own kind of challenges and struggles and speed bumps that you have to deal with in Canada as an investor outside of the country. But
Mm.
you always bring such a great mindset to it. By the way, all of our Canadian members, we actually have a few now. They all have the best mindset. So we could all learn something from our neighbors from the north. But yeah, you bring such a great mindset. So talk to us. I mean, could you give some encouraging advice? Because I've heard you say it before, but let's kind of talk to the audience here. Encouraging advice to people who um they're struggling with the negativity or the just, the fluctuations of the market, the difficulties of the market, tariffs, new legislation, things going on in their specific market. What could you tell people who are dealing with those struggles?
I I I would say that that's your best struggle. And
Mm,
you won't hear a lot of people say this, but that's your best struggle because you learn so much. You learn how to get conservative with running your numbers. You get stronger because you're building a better team. Uh, all the people who are hyped up, who they get out of the market. People who stay in the market are really the solid ones. So I would say that, this environment is actually one of the best environments because you won't get all this in a environment when real estate is, rising up like we had 3 4 years ago during COVID time. Real estate prices just were climbing, climbing, climbing. But I would say a kindergarten could do business in that time during those times.
that's right.
Uh, but however, in these times, it really comes out to, who's I call it BIG, big, and I would say who's bold, who has integrity, and who's a giver.
Mm,
And that comes from me because I'm very connected to my communities, whether it's fundraising, whether it's real estate, whether it's friends. Uh, so I'm a very people's person, and I like to attract positive vibes into my life. I don't watch news. I don't read newspapers. Uh, I am on social media, but I spend limited time because I
yeah.
want to stay hyper focused.
So well said. And by the way, I was only writing a note because I love big. That is so well said. I really like that. Bold, integrity, and giving. I couldn't say it better myself. And I was smiling ear to ear about that whole response because I couldn't have said that better myself when it comes to when people have struggles and challenges, look at it as a gift.
It is.
Would you say this is your best challenge? Is
I
that
would
the way?
say,
Yeah.
yeah, this
It's
is,
that's so well said. Absolutely. Yeah, and if you can learn to work through the hard times, imagine what's going to happen when good times come. You're just going to skyrocket as long as you stay focused. You can't lose your focus there. But there's
Mhm.
nothing that sharpens your focus. You've said this. I've heard you say maybe word for word. There's nothing that sharpens your focus like difficulties, like struggles, like a hard time.
Yeah.
So especially, I mean, whether it's a hard time or a good time right now, it's definitely an uncertain time. We can all say that. It's a very
Hmm.
uncertain time,
Hmm.
which, I mean, uncertainty is not necessarily looked at as a positive thing in business, but if it can sharpen your focus, my mentor always said constraints should be looked at as a good thing because you become more resourceful, you become sharper, you have a sharper focus, etc. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's fantastic.
That's what I could share with everybody who's watching this today.
Right. I love it. And honestly, I feel like we could just talk about that, you know.
Yeah.
But let's
And I'll
talk.
appreciate if the audience can even, give us comments, right? Because I know you're going to post us somewhere in YouTube or on your page. If they can comment and if what are their thoughts? Maybe they're running through challenges that maybe we can help them through this calls, right, in future.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on the comments. I'll show you when I post it. We're posting this on YouTube, as part of our new thing where we're talking to our great TRP members and showing that these members, I mean, you guys are what make the group and just the network, right? And maybe that's actually a cool thing for us to transition into our conversation is, the importance of a network, while also balancing that with being cautious of getting into the wrong network. You kind of see what I'm getting at there?
Yeah.
Because you have to search out for people who can mentor you, can help you, groups that you can be a part of, but you can also end up in a bad group, right? Can you talk about like maybe ways that you would advise people how to navigate that balance?
Yeah. So I would say, you know, for somebody who's trying to get into a group, uh, I would I've done this and I would suggest to do it. Talk to at least three members of that community before you join.
Mm,
You know, that's because talking to human beings, you really get the vibe, right?
sure.
Uh, so that's the first thing I would really do. The second thing
Smart.
I would do is, I don't like to join huge communities, right? But I like to build and I like to join, communities where there's conversations about real estate or whatever it is about, right?
Hmm.
So like I have a real estate community where we talk real estate, and it's not about big and small. It's about conversations that make sense.
That's right. Yeah, I've always found that small communities you can form that connection with. Like I
Yes.
love another thing we talked about today on our TRP call. We mentioned it briefly. I love that it's turning into a family. And there's so many people who are TRP members where I've met their kids, I know their spouses, I know their goals and their whys and what they really want to accomplish with their life, right? Beyond real estate, the families they're building, the purpose they want to give out into this world or that they want to fulfill in this world. And that means a lot to me. When you get lost in the mix of these big groups, I don't see the appeal, to each their own, of course, but I'm with you. I'd rather be in a smaller group where I get to know everybody.
Yeah, a
You know?
small to mid-size where people want to have conversations, maybe one-on-one. And I'll just give an example, like today's call that we had with TRP. I did share some challenges, and one member, her daughter lives in the area that where I invest in Ohio, and she sent me a message during the call, reach out to me. I reached out to her, and like she replied to my email within 30 minutes. The call had not even ended, and I saw an email from her that
Amazing.
her daughter's in the area. Maybe, reach out to her daughter, and then uh, her daughter recommended a contractor who she's used before, and she had success with. So, that's how fast it gets when you are in a tight-knitted community, I would
Sure.
say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you would think that a bigger community, you have more resources and more options, but that doesn't always, it potentially turns into that. But how are you going to meet all these people? It's something I'm pretty conscious about as a side note with the Rehabbers Playbook. I never want to get it to a point where I don't know what everybody's doing and what everybody's up to. I've always said that if I ever get to that point, I either need more captains on board to help kind of uh, work on those relationships, or I need to kind of scale it back. So that's great. Now, I mean, we've all seen those stories of people ending up in the wrong group and potentially getting hurt, right? And you were mentioning to me last week about a story that you know of a friend that ended up in a bad situation. I know a story I can share of a friend, a really good friend, who ended up in a bad situation with people who were in the group that everybody knows, everybody loves, everybody has great conversations with, but they ended up in this bad situation where let's just say everybody kind of got hurt and monetarily, and it just wasn't pretty all the way around. And I think there's lawyers involved, and I won't go into too much detail, but
Yeah.
we've all seen these stories. So, I mean, words of caution, do you have any for people also that are looking for that community? I know you said, reach out to three members. I think that's great advice, but I kind of want to sit on this for a second and see if we can give people good direction.
Yeah. Well, Brandon, when we are doing a joint venture, think of it this way. Don't think about it as this person is Mr. Perfect on social media.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
I
would
love this. Yep.
I would highly recommend that you protect your interest and your financial money that you're going to invest with somebody else and do it the right way. It does cost some money to hire a lawyer to give you to give you the advice. However, it's going to take you a long way because think about it this way. You investing that $500 or $800 with a lawyer to draft an agreement keeps everybody accountable and responsible.
That's right.
Now, now just the on the side note here is when we don't do that, that's where we find a lot of problems coming in. That's where we find misunderstandings and miscommunication, and one party is not responding, and to either texts, emails, uh, or whichever way you originally try to contact that person, versus when you are under contract and a legal binding document that was drafted by your lawyers, or it doesn't have to be a huge lawyer,
Yeah.
they are lawyers who charge you $300 an hour, 250 an hour, and they would take 1 hour and draft it for you, and move from there. But that's one of my biggest learnings. I always want documentation to be done.
That's right. And I've always said it this way, and it's just another way of saying exactly what you just said, which is it not only protects everybody, but it defines the relationship. I just think people think that they have relationships defined in JV agreements, and they don't, and it really comes down to all those fine details. As a matter of fact, Trevor in the group, I have a call with him a long time ago where we talked about this. He's really, really knowledgeable on this stuff. He's done a lot of JV agreements, and it's exactly that. It's just making sure you have everything spelled out. It's kind of like what we do with contractors. We spell everything out. Same with your partners. You have to make sure it's all spelled out. If there's any vagueness, if there's any cloudiness, that will get exploited, whether it's purposeful or not, you know.
Yes, and that's my recommendation. Whether you're new, whether you're experienced, whatever, you can be a professional, but still this agreement is going to do you good, then do you harm.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, I'll transition one more time, at least another time. Um, Let's talk about subcontractors and contractors and how to manage subcontractors and contractors. One of my favorite things that you provide to the group and that you always chime in with is advice on how to deal with subcontractors. And I think it does go back. I didn't know your background in, you know, working in the factory and managing people for 14 hours a day, by the way, which is crazy. But what have you learned? Like what stuff can you provide? I feel like this is just a big advice giving session, but what else would it be, right? How could you, what are things that you've learned with managing subcontractors specifically? What's advice that you could give other people? It could be stuff about payment structures, incentives, agreements like we just talked about, anything.
Yeah. I would say they're different types of subcontractors, but let's keep it basic, right? When we hire subcontractors, we really want a couple of things from them. We want to know whether they are licensed and are they bonded.
Yeah.
Now, be careful over here. I'm going somewhere else with this. I came across licensed bonded contractors who are not licensed in the state where my property was.
Mm,
And that can be a red flag
Sure.
because let's just think that there's contractors in Pennsylvania, they don't have a job there, and they were willing to come down to Ohio, to Cleveland, and it's a 2.5 hour drive. Now, what if they stop in the middle and just go away? What happens next?
Yeah.
Are you in a legal dispute? Are you in a, there's a lot of things. So always hire people who are licensed by the city in the state where you're investing.
I would say too, I mean, this is just me, but I think a red flag is any contractor who would have to travel 2.5 hours for work.
Yes.
I don't even like going 30 minutes out of my way for the most part. If you start saying 45, I'm like, you're too far from me. Now that's
Yeah.
just me. I've seen great contractors travel. I've seen great contractors travel almost 2 hours, but you still got to be careful. And you got like that has to be somebody who is getting paid extra for that travel, for that trip. 2 hours is probably a lot. An hour, I think that's kind of the limit. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would definitely, not hire trades outside my area.
Hmm.
As you said, Brandon, 30 minutes, 45 minutes is that, is a distance for somebody to drive,
Hmm.
uh, and to control what's going on at your property. Uh, so I highly recommend that. I highly recommend document again for what you're hiring them, and
Mm.
uh, and do make sure that their estimate, or it says a fixed cost, whereas instead of an estimate, because estimates can vary, and also make sure that they are going to do the total job instead of saying that, oh, pay us, we did 5 items, pay us for 5 items now, when the
Yeah.
understanding was follow the agreement where the installments are,
Yeah.
listed. So that can, backfight sometimes with each other, even though we are doing contracts, right?
It's amazing. I really think you have so much to give and so much advice to give when it comes to dealing with subcontractors. And again, it really just goes back to your background with managing people. And sometimes it takes seeing that relationship between somebody managing somebody's work in different settings to really draw connections of what works universally, what works specifically, and how you can leverage that to be better, more efficient, create better relationships, etc. I saw you say, speaking on that, I saw you say something one time about down payments and deposits. You said, surprise, contractors don't show up upon deposit or something like that, right?
Yeah. It's a hard part of this business, right?
Hmm.
And again, I like to control my deposits, right? Uh, I give as much as I feel that if I lose this money, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
So, and that has to be, put in the numbers, right? So I had a contractor, uh, and I learned from my mistakes, and I admit my mistakes.
Hmm.
Uh, that's how I can learn.
Right.
So I did hire a contractor who said that he's close to my property, but later I found out it was like a 1 hour and 1.5 hour drive for him. But
Jeez.
he said, I'm going to be there. He sent me texts every day. I'm available. I'm here to do whatever you need me to do and all that. And I said, I'm a human being, right? I have a heart. Um, and that's what I said earlier, right? You have to be a giver, and when you do business. And I
Hmm.
said, I'll hire you, but I'm not going to give you the full job. Let's
Right.
try this out. I'm going to hire you for demoing the boiler, for example, right? And getting the radiance out. And he's like, okay, done. So he sends me an invoice. Perfect. And I sent him gas money.
Yep.
I didn't send him a deposit. I told him, I'll give you gas money. That's going to go into deposit. All right. On the final payment, I'll minus that out, but I'll give you gas money. So I know that you're safe, and you will get to the property.
Yep.
And so I gave him gas money. The invoice was like $1,000. I gave him $200, right?
Hmm.
So if you look at it, it's a 20% down payment. Although my heart feels like, okay, that's gas money, but it's a 20% deposit.
Right.
And he didn't show up.
Yep.
And he sent me a message a day or two later. He said something happened. A day or two later, I will contact you in a few days. And now he's disappeared.
Yep.
So
It's so funny too. I love this conversation. This conversation can go so deep when it comes to like how that it's like it's a subconscious thing. So what I'm trying to say is I have really good subcontractors. Subcontractors I worked for or worked with for years. And sometimes they'll say, like an electrician, for example, he'll say, look, wiring's gone up. I'd love a down payment before we do this because I'm gonna have to put a couple thousand in before I draw down the first payment. It's like that's a very reasonable thing to ask for. As long as I think it matches the amount of material and he's not profiting at this point, I will do it and I trust you, right? But it's funny, there's something in our chemistry, there's something in our brain, subconscious, whatever it is, that as soon as you get the money without doing any work, it's like, you know what? I was going to show up on Thursday, but I'm going to show up on Monday now. And now it doesn't mean they always disappear, but it's this idea of money being an incentive, right? And
Mhm.
I always say this, money talks. I'll land my plane here, Danny, I promise. But money talks. I've always said this, and that doesn't mean like we hold money over contractors' head as like cheese and now go do work until I say you're ready and then I give you money. It's just money says a lot of different things. And if you give people down payments before they ever do work, that's saying that you deserve money without doing work. Then
Yes.
something subconscious clicks in and says, you know what? I don't need to show up tomorrow. I can show up Monday. It'll be perfectly fine. Does
Yeah.
that make sense what I'm trying to say
Oh,
there?
absolutely. You're
Yeah.
100% right. You're 100% right over there. Money talks in different ways,
Hmm.
for sure. And
Many
this,
different
we
ways.
can talk about this for next 1 hour. I totally agree to that. But we're giving, pieces of information that we would like to share with the audience so they don't make these mistakes and take it from there. Uh, the community has helped me a lot. Thank you for putting this community together, Brandon, because as you can see, I love communities, and adding value, or somebody else adding value to my life, it means a lot.
Oh, that means a lot, man. I mean, that's stuff like that. You saying things like that is what it's all about. And the community, I started, by the way, today's our 3-year anniversary, which was pretty cool.
Congratulations. Well
Thank you.
deserved.
Yeah, and you know what told me that was Facebook. So I didn't even realize that until I woke up and saw it on Facebook. It's funny
Right.
how that works. But anyway, we put this together a long time ago, and I tell our group all the time, I tell people outside the group all the time, it's everybody in the community that makes it what it is. And if it wasn't for you guys, I mean, we would all just be floating around trying to rehab by ourselves, but now we get to rehab and build together. So, Danny, I'll end it there and I'll save the rest for our next conversation. I appreciate you very much. And, is there any way that people should follow you? Anything that, you want to give out to the audience before we leave, or do you want to be incognito? Both is fine with me. You let me know.
The easiest way for anybody to reach out to me is on Facebook. Look for Danny Sai, and you'll see my picture there. Uh, and if you want to have a conversation about whether it's about U.S. investing, whether you're a Canadian who wants to start investing in the U.S., uh, or anything, I'm just open.
I second that. I think a lot of people can say things like that, but Danny absolutely means that. He's here to give, he's here to help. And I think exactly what he just mentioned, he could definitely help people who are in Canada, outside the country, or people who have subcontractor type. issues. Or I'm telling you, Danny, one of my favorite things is your positivity. So, guys, reach out to Danny if you want to, and he'll always, I know he'll help. And until next time, Danny, I appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much.
So
I
glad
really
to have you
appreciate
part of the
the time.
group. And
Yeah,
yeah, we'll see everybody on the next video.
absolutely.
All
Thank you,
right,
guys.
take care.